Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we're going over UFC Vegas 44, headlined by an awesome bantamweight scrap between Jose Aldo and Rob Font. Really can't wait to see how that fight goes down, and not to mention a scintillating co-main event between former training partners Brad Riddell and Rafael Fiziev. A couple other great fights sprinkled out throughout this card. A 15-fight slate headed your way this weekend, and I can't wait to get back into the action as we did have a weekend off this past weekend. With that said, let's get into the recap of the weekend prior for UFC Vegas 43, where we did scrape a little bit of profit on the night, on a night that we actually did not have a lock of the night play. However, if we did, we probably would have cashed it. So let's start off with the L's. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way first, right? The dog of the night plays really shit the bed. First and foremost, the under 4.5 in the Tate and Vieira fight didn't really go the way that I expected it to. Vieira showed great cardio from minute 1 to minute 25, and she was able to shuck off the takedown attempts of Miesha Tate. Even Ketlin Vieira, I thought she'd be able to get Tate out of there early. She was unable to, and we saw this fight go on for 25 minutes. So we whiff on the under 4.5. Next up, Tucker Lutz had 1 unit on him at plus 110. Pat Sabatini did a great job in terms of grounding the fight and really grinding out Tucker Lutz there. Lutz just was not able to get his game going. Hats off to Pat Sabatini, who continues to improve on a fight-to-fight basis. And then lastly, I took a 0.5 unit shot on Sam Hughes at plus 350 over Luana Pinheiro. I was happy that we got out of round one. Round two was damn near close to being an hour round, as unfortunately Luana Pinheiro was able to drop her at the ending of that round and take that round. And then in the third round, I thought Sam Hughes won that round. I saw a couple 30-27s on the scorecards, which didn't make sense to me. I thought it was 29-28 Pinheiro, to be honest, but we were very close to hitting that in my opinion. However, the Luana Pinheiro fade does not stop with this fight. Again, we're only going to get better fighters now to fade her with, and if you're going to continue to give me plus 250, plus 300 against her, I will fade her accordingly. But I'll be a little bit more selective in terms of the fighter that I'm choosing to fade her with. So minus 0.5 units there. So all in all, minus 2.5 units on the underdogs. But luckily, we had two more plays on the card that allowed us to end up in profit. The first of which was a parlay. I had 1 unit on a parlay of Tyler Santos. Obviously, she goes out there and starches Joanne Calderwood in the first round, so great win for us there. And then Rafa Garcia really gutting it out in that third round and being able to pull off the decision victory there. So that cashes for 1.41 units. And then lastly, this was going to be my lock of the night play if I were to have one. It was Lupito Godinez. I had 2.5 units on her at minus 167. That cashes for 1.5 units, going exactly the way I expected it to. And now Godinez has my complete respect, and I will look to back her in future fights, as she is really that fighter that I believe that she could be, and she did, and she showed it this past weekend or 2 weekends ago, depending on when you guys are listening to this. So all in all, plus 0.41 units, 7% ROI on the night. Again, we end up in the green. I'm good enough and happy enough with that. We just need to dig ourselves out of this hole to make sure we end up in the green for 2021, as we only have 3 events left in this calendar year. So got some picking up to do. Already got my bets placed on the Patreon. Obviously the plays will drop for free on my social media accounts on Friday evening. So if you guys don't want to wait for that long and wait, hesitant about potential line moving or anything like that, check out the Patreon. That's why I'm plugging that now. $5 a month. You guys get a lot of bang for your buck there. A great Discord community as well to make some friends with and talk other sports as well. So shout out to everybody on the Discord. But we got a massive amount of support over there. So yeah, make sure you guys check out the Discord. Link is in the Patreon link is in the description below. And then lastly, shout out to Coolbet, coolbet.com. Use promo code MMALOTN2 and then match your initial deposit up to $200. It's a great site. You can bet props, you can parlay props. They have great lines as well. The majority of my bets that I make is through that website as well. So make sure you guys check out Coolbet. Once again, make sure you guys sign up and use promo code MMALOTN2. That's the number 2, and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. It is so weird trying to do this intro since I didn't do it last week. It's always weird taking a week off and then get back into this chair and trying to get back into the groove of things. But we got 3 events left for the year, and I'm hoping to get back in the groove of things of even getting cash into our pockets as well. So, check out the breakdowns, and I'll see you guys on the flip side for the outro. Louis Smolka versus Vince Morales. We got minus 150 on Louis Smolka and plus 130 the return on Vince Morales. Now, I'm very much looking forward to this fight because I truly believe that this could be one of the better performances from Louis Smolka that we'll see, especially considering the level of competition that he's getting here with Vince Morales. Now, Morales has a couple wins inside the UFC, most notably Ayman Zahabi, and obviously his last fight against Draco Rodriguez. But those were fights where he was able to go out there and maintain his level of comfortability boxing in that boxing range that his opponents were allowing him to stay inside. Usually when Vince Morales has issues, his opponents are kind of getting him out of that boxing range, right? Vince Morales was getting him at kicking range where he was able to really, Chris Gutierrez was getting him at kicking range where he was able to just chew up that lead calf and obviously get him out of there due to leg kicks. There were obviously other fights in the past. Domingo Pilarte, who's been able to take him down and then submit him in the second round. And Louis Smolka, given his style of fighting, is not going to give Vince Morales the type of fight that he wants to win this fight. Now, Louis Smolka usually goes out there and really just pushes the pace against his opponent, stays in front of their face. He's usually at a speed disadvantage, but he's really good at keeping the same type of pace from minute 1 to minute 15 or whatever minute it requires for him to get to eventually get his opponents out of there. In the 3 fights that we've seen him win since returning to the octagon, we've seen that on full display. He moves forward, he eats some shots, and he's able to chug through it, and then he eventually gets his opponent to the ground and uses his superior jiu-jitsu to get him out of there, whether it's with ground and pound or a submission of his own. We've obviously seen Louis Smolka go out there and fight much more difficult opponents than what Vince Morales brings to the table, which leads me to believe that this minus 150 could be a gift to us in hindsight. I had to take the shot on it myself, as I do believe that Vince Morales doesn't really deserve a spot on the roster, even though he does have a couple wins over some of these guys. However, once he actually fights guys that are not going to just let him play his game, he's going to run into trouble, and I think that Louis Smolka is the perfect example of a guy that will give him trouble. I think Smolka will eat some shots early in this fight, but I do think that his durability is good enough that he should be able to withstand those shots from Vince Morales, who has not been much of a knockout threat as of late. And I think after that, maybe in the second round, the takedowns will start to catch up to Vince Morales, and then that superior jiu-jitsu will be on full display from Louis Smolka, who should be able to either get a ground and pound finish or a submission of his own. So I'm looking at Smolka inside the distance, but even if his money line at minus 150, I think is a solid spot. I'd bet it up to minus 200, maybe even minus 220, maybe even minus 250, as I don't really think that Vince Morales brings much to the table that Smolka needs to worry about. Now, if Vince Morales had a little bit more to knockout power, then I'd be a little bit more concerned, considering at times that Louis Smolka is a little bit too hittable. However, Vince is just, doesn't really have much on his shots. I think Smolka is going to keep him on his back foot and then eventually get him to the ground and then eventually get him out of there with some ground and pound or a submission of his own. So I'm going to go with Louis Smolka, and I'll take him to win this fight by second round submission. Jared Vanderaa welcomes Dana White Contender Series alum Azamat Murzakanov to the UFC for his first ever fight. And Murzakanov has gone through a little bit of a change-up. He was originally scheduled to fight Marcin Prachnio. Prachnio pulls out, and that fight was supposed to take place at 205 pounds. In steps Philippe Lins at heavyweight. Murzakanov accepting the fight at a higher weight class just to go out there and compete. Philippe Lins pulls out, and in steps Jared Vanderaa now, and now we got Murzakanov going up against a much larger opponent. He's gonna, in terms of odds, we're looking at minus 210 for Murzakanov, plus 175 the return on Jared Vanderaa. Like I was alluding to, Azamat will be very undersized in this fight. He's going to be at a 6-inch height disadvantage as well as a 9-inch reach disadvantage. So a huge tough task for Murzakanov to have to overcome in his UFC debut. But considering what the public is saying or seeing, Jared Vanderaa opened up around plus 220, plus 240, and a ton of money came in on him, bringing him down to a plus 175, which doesn't seem too bad of a spot here. Now, I think the way for Murzakanov to win this fight is if he goes out there and implements his striking, because he's going to be the faster of the two, and his footwork should be good enough to keep him in and out of these exchanges with Vanderaa, where he should be able to get his strikes off and then get out of the way before Vanderaa is able to land, a combination and put up the numbers that he was able to, similar to his fight against against Justin Tafa for a couple fights ago, right? If you guys went back and watched that breakdown that I did for the Tafa and Vanderaa fight, and anybody's breakdown for that fight, I think a lot of people expected Vanderaa to drag the fight to the ground if he was going to have any success there. However, he was able to put up really good numbers against Justin Tafa, and it seemed like, you know, his game plan was throw a combination out there, or whenever there was a combination thrown his way from Justin Tafa, make sure he's throwing the same amount, if not more, punches in return, and always having the last laugh in terms of the exchanges of these striking scenarios. I'd be surprised if he does the same thing to Murzakanov here, who just has better movement than what Justin Tafa was bringing to the table, and I do think that he'll be able to get in and out much faster than what Tafa was able to do. If Murzakanov wants to go out and grapple with Vanderaa, I think that would be a bad move in terms of it's going to take him a lot of energy to try to get a much bigger man like Vanderaa to the ground, and then even getting him to the ground, I think it'll be tough for him to kind of hold him in that spot. I do think the best work for Azamat will come in the striking, and that's where he should keep this fight because he should be the faster of the two. And I feel like I should be more confident in Murzakanov here, especially, you know, I haven't really thought highly of Jared Vanderaa recently. But this could be a fishy one. This could be one of those ones where we, you know, the size actually plays a difference. You know, one fight that this really reminds me of is Luana Carolina against Lupita Godinez, a fight that we got a couple of weeks ago. And that's a fight where we knew the more skilled fighter of the two was the smaller fighter in Lupita Godinez. And in this case, it's going to be Murzakanov. However, that size and that strength differential played such a massive part in that fight that the better fighter couldn't end up getting the victory. And we could possibly see that happen here with Jared Vanderaa, who's a very tough out. And unless, Murzakanov can go out there and Romanov his way to a victory, which I'd be very surprised if he's able to have as much success as Romanov did, I think it's going to be tough for Murzakanov to pull it off. My official prediction will be Murzakanov by knockout. I do think he eventually finds that chin of Vanderaa within the first round of this fight, but the longer that this fight goes, the more concerns I'll have about Murzakanov being able to pull this victory off. So personally, this fight's a stay away from me. You know, Murzakanov can go on and be a very solid fighter, but, you know, he's getting up there in age. I believe he's 35 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just quickly confirm that, because I do believe that is definitely something that we need to keep an eye on. Yeah, he's 35 years old. So again, another guy coming into the UFC, similar to Jeremiah Wells, who's also fighting on this card. They need to get it going now, and getting a very solid knockout victory over Jared Vanderaa should help him, get him going. With that said, this fight's taking place at 100. Heavyweight, and this guy's actually a 205er, so I'm not sure how much it'll do for him rankings wise, but at least it should get him something on his highlight reel so that people are looking forward to watching this fight and this guy compete again, and hopefully start working his way up the rankings and maybe get a title shot sooner than later. But I'm getting way too far ahead of the game right now. He has Vanderaa this week, and I'm picking him to win this fight by a first-round knockout, but I'm keeping my money off this fight. Again, rightful favorite, but everything going into this fight, short notice, size discrepancy, all that type of stuff, it's enough for me to just sit back and watch this, poor man's David versus Goliath type of fight go down. So I like Murzakanov, and I'll take him to win this fight via first-round knockout. Claudio Puelles versus Chris Gruetzemacher, and we got a pick 'em fight here. Both guys coming in at -110, and for good reason. This should be somewhat of a competitive fight until one of them are able to kind of set themselves apart and get ahead of the game here. And I think that guy is actually going to be Claudio Puelles. Now, Chris Gruetzemacher is obviously coming off a tremendous victory over Rafa Garcia last time around, where he came in as a pretty sizable underdog. And as a lot of people believe that Rafa Garcia was going to go out there and knock him out, just similar to what Alex Hernandez was able to do the fight before for Chris Gruetzemacher. However, he showed toughness, grittiness, and was able to get through that first barrage of strikes that Garcia threw at him that he could possibly got him out with. But Garcia was not able to, and Gruetzemacher was able to put the pressure on him in rounds 2 and 3 and squeak out a decision victory that night. With Puelles, he's coming off handing Jordan Levitt his first ever professional MMA loss, and as a pretty decent underdog in that fight as well. Not a lot of people believed that he'd be able to deal with the BJJ of Levitt. However, it was Levitt that was not able to deal with the BJJ of Puelles, and Puelles was able to stay a step ahead the entire time whenever they got into grappling exchanges. Now, both guys usually get their best work done when they get their opponents to the ground. However, I think that Puelles, with the slightly better striking game here, could really start to separate himself from Gruetzemacher in this fight, landing the better strikes on the feet and then eventually landing some takedowns. Now, Gruetzemacher has shown some durability and the ability, and surviving, certain spots, especially when it gets to the grappling realm. Most notably his fight against Davi Hamosh, where it took Hamosh a long time to finally sink in that rear naked choke. Not saying that Puelles is going to be able to have the same success in terms of nabbing a choke, but I think he's going to have a little bit of trouble in terms of keeping Grits down. And even when he does get back to his feet, I do think his striking should be able to bail him out of bad positions against Gruetzemacher, and then I think he should be able to ground this fight over and over again, getting the judges to side his way because he's just, more active on the feet, and then obviously being the one that lands the takedowns. I don't want to completely write off Gruetzemacher here because he could, pull off his own antics here. If he's able to get back to his feet routinely and then maybe even land some takedowns of his own, he could potentially put Puelles in some bad trouble as well. However, I do think that Puelles will be able to get back to his feet, maybe even find some reversals of his own, because I do think he might be the better BJJ practitioner out of both of these guys. But I do think that his athleticism and his strength will be the difference maker here compared to the durability and the grittiness that Gruetzemacher will bring to the table. So I took a small shot on Puelles here at -108, so pretty much a pick'em line. But I do think that this should be slightly more in favor of Puelles, maybe -130, -140 for his side. So I was more than happy to take a shot on him at these 50-50 odds. I'm going Puelles via decision at +200. Puelles via submission at +500 is not too bad of a shot either, but I do think that the eventual outcome will be Puelles getting his hand raised via decision. Alonzo Menifield versus William Knight. We got -140 on Alonzo Menifield and +120 on William Knight. Now, these guys were scheduled to fight each other back in February of this year. However, one of them had to pull out, both of them had to pull out. I think they've had a couple times where they were scheduled for to fight one another, but due to COVID protocols, the fight had to get pulled off. And since then, both of them have competed twice. Both of them, it was Alonzo Menifield that got a win over Fabio Charant, where he was able to get a Von Preux choke, and then after that he was able to go out there and beat Ed Herman over 15 minutes, whereas on the flip side with William Knight, he ended up losing his first fight after these two were originally booked. He ended up getting pretty much grounded and grapple fucked by Da Un Jung, and then after that he was able to go out there and put the lights out of Fabio Charant back in August. That was actually a fight that I was live for. If you guys remember, I went back to the Apex in August and watched that Gaslam and Cannonier card, and that was the card that William Knight fought Fabio Charant. And one thing that will always stick to me to this day is one of the body kicks that William Knight landed on Fabio Charant. It just rung through the entire Apex, and John Anik even made a comment about it when that kick had occurred, saying, look, just listen to that clap and listen to that impact. And again, I just remember out of the loudest shots that I heard that entire night, that is the one that stood out to me the most. With that said, that's kind of William Knight's game. When he is in the striking room, he has some very nasty kicks, whether it's to the body or to the legs, but he does eventually want to open you up and lull you into that overhand right. Even his lead left hook is pretty nasty, which he was able to catch Fabio Charant with, even while moving backwards and putting his lights out. So yeah, big brick shit house of a man that you need to worry about in terms of his power. But the issue that I found with him was his fight with Da Un Jung. He just kept getting taken down with the same exact technique over and over again, and did not have any answer for it. He just could not get back to his feet either. He did a couple times, but when he did, he was able to get dragged down to the feet or dragged down to the mat once again, and he just could have nothing going right for him in that fight. He even got his eye busted up pretty bad, and Da Un Jung was able to get that win via decision that night. Alonzo Menifield, on the other hand, showed that he can go a solid 50 minutes if he needs to, and it all comes down to him not blowing his wad in that first round. And I think that Saif Sayoud has done a great job in terms of tempering his big bursts and allowing him to go 15 minutes. Like even in the first round of that Ed Herman fight, you can see them do the coaches camp thing, and you can hear Saif Saud saying everything light, so he doesn't throw everything into those shots and then ultimately gas himself out and gets finished in the second or third round. He was able to just beat up that lead leg of Ed Herman and then get that takedown in that third round to really do some rough work on Ed Herman and then take home that decision victory. If Menifield wanted to, I feel like the takedown could be there for him against a guy like William Knight, but I think it's going to have to be a very calm and cautious approach from both guys. The over 1.5 around -160 is something that catches my eye. I can see both of these guys having tremendous respect for one another, and then we see this fight go into the second and third round, and then they possibly start to pick up the pace. But I do think that we'll see Menifield try to trade kicks here with Knight, maybe start to open up with the strikes as well. But I do think that eventually Menifield is going to get his hands around Knight. He'll be able to drag him to the ground and maybe do enough work from on top where Knight's going to struggle to get back to his feet. Not saying that's a lock by any means, but I feel like that's the game plan that a guy like Saif Saud can devise, especially when he sees the obvious hole in William Knight's game that can be exploited here. So with little confidence, I am going with the Menifield side. I do think he grinds this fight out, and I do think we see him win this fight via decision. Cheyenne Vlismas going up against Mallory Martin. We got -180 on Cheyenne and +160 the return on Mallory Martin. Yes, it seems like there has been some tumultuous times in the Bays household, and it seems like Cheyenne has officially decided to go back to her maiden name, and now she's going to be going by Cheyenne Vlismas. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name correctly because I haven't heard it on any footage as of recently, as they've been together for pretty long, and they were obviously married, but it seems like that JP Bays and her have decided to part ways, and she's going back to her maiden name. So this will be the last time that I refer to her as Bays. I'm going to be going with her, the Vlismas name just for accuracy's sake. Now, this is an interesting fight. Vlismas obviously had to pull out of her fight a couple weeks ago as she did test positive for COVID, and apparently it was quite bad. And she even came out in an interview saying that her lungs could possibly still be damaged by the time she steps into the cage this weekend, yet it's a sacrifice she's willing to make. And that's just not a good look for me, especially with somebody that's going to be going up against a grappling-heavy fighter that could give Vlismas some troubles now. Vlismas, when she does have success, she's able to drag her opponents to the ground and really just smother from there and get some good work going from on top. However, we haven't really seen her offer her back, except, there's one fight on the regional scene where she was able she was content with playing off her back a little bit too long and just gave up the round. And then obviously we know the Montserrat Ruiz fight where she just was not able to get out of that scarf hold position. But that's a fight that I'm just going to write off, right? Like we're never going to see that type of scenario play out again unless Montserrat Ruiz steps back into the cage. So I'm going to give Vlismas a mulligan on that. However, if we are to extract anything from that fight, it's the fact that she does struggle at times to get off of her back, but there isn't enough overwhelming evidence to go out there and be like, okay, +160 on Mallory Martin's a good spot here. It could be a decent spot, right? I'm not paying -180, -190 on Cheyenne in this spot because, again, she's going up against the toughest grappler she's ever gone against. And there is decent enough evidence to say that Mallory Martin could be the better wrestler of the two. So if Vlismas is not able to get the fight to the ground, and Martin is, what if Martin just grinds her out from on top? And that's where my concern lays for this fight. I wish I had a little bit more trust in Martin, though, as I do believe that her wrestling could get her to some solid spots. She's been a big favorite over fighters in the past, just due to the grappling advantage that she's going to have. But if she does actually have the wrestling advantage here against Cheyenne, this could look like a one-way fight, and she could look like the -200 favorite by the time the decision is read in this fight. Again, very little confidence in this spot, but I do like Mallory Martin to go out there and land takedowns and get the better of the grappling exchanges and then eventually grind this fight out. And that's tough for me to say, especially considering that I had Cheyenne as my lock of the night play last time around, which cashed, luckily enough, when she knocked out Gloria de Paula a couple months ago. I believe that was back in July. But again, like I said, she hasn't fought anybody that's going to consistently put her on her back and make her work to get back to her feet. And if she shows that she is not able to work back to her feet, then things get a little bit iffy, especially for a -200 favorite here. So my money, well, not my money, but my maybe my D-gen money, if I throw in a Hail Mary or what I like to call a Gabby Garcia parlay, I'd probably be going with the Mallory Martin side. I do think she could get the better of the grappling exchanges. Not with a whole lot of confidence. Again, not even to the point of playing the plus 160, especially if you're picking an underdog to win. More often than not, you should go out there and actually bet them. I just can't trust Mallory Martin enough to play that plus 160 line on her. So I am going to go with the Mallory Martin side. Like I said, I do think she'll out-wrestle Cheyenne Buys in this spot. I think if they do get caught up in these similar situations, Martin will probably end up on top. And again, until Vlismas shows us that she can get out of these bad positions, it's going to be tough to back her at this minus 180 range, especially when she's going up against another grappler herself. So I'm going to go Mallory Martin. I'm going to take her to win this fight via decision. Jake Matthews versus Jeremiah Wells. We got minus 165 on the Australian and plus 145 on Jeremiah Wells. Now, Jeremiah Wells is actually from the same training camp as Jake Matthews' last opponent, Sean Brady. So I'm interested to see if they're able to take things from that fight and bring it on over to this fight. Funnily enough, both guys have a similar fighting style, which is drag their opponents to the ground and really get some work going from on top and either pounding them out, submitting them, or grinding their way to a decision. Jeremiah Wells has a little bit of a sketchy gas tank, and that gives me some concern. However, Jake Matthews is another guy that does start to slow down later in his fights, especially when he's really powering his positions through in the first 2 rounds to try to ground his opponents and then eventually keep them there. However, I think that Jeremiah Wells presents a lot more trouble for Matthews on the feet, especially with the power that he holds. But I do think that Jeremiah Wells will be good enough in terms of dragging this fight to the ground and really grinding him out, probably for the first 2 rounds, and then taking home a decision victory by surviving that 3rd round. Again, Jake Matthews in round 3, not anything to run home about or anything like that. I do think that Jake Matthews won't be able to get Matthews out of there. Jake won't be able to get Wells out of there the later that this fight goes. There's 2 ways you could possibly approach this fight. Well, 3 ways actually. Betting Jeremiah Wells straight, because betting an underdog straight is always the right thing to do, especially if you think they have a good chance of winning the fight. But in terms of props, round 1 is about plus 450 for Jeremiah Wells. Obviously, he's starched a couple opponents in round 1 in the past, but Jeremiah Wells by decision at plus 600. Not too bad of a spot either, right? Jake Matthews is relatively hard to put away early in fights. He has been finished in 3rd rounds in the past, but I just don't know if Jeremiah Wells will have that pop and that ability to put away his opponent in the 3rd round, similar to what Anthony Rocco Martin and Sean Brady were able to do against Jake Matthews. So I do think that we'll see a back and forth grappling fight here. It's going to come down to who lands the takedowns and who's able to get that top control going. However, I've seen Jeremiah Wells be able to explode out of bad positions in the past, and I do think that Jake Matthews will struggle to keep him down, and then I think that he'll struggle to get back to his feet, something that he wasn't able to do routinely against a guy like Sean Brady, who trains side by side with Jeremiah Wells on a daily basis. So Jeremiah Wells is up there in age as well. I think he's 34, 35 years old at this point. He's going to have an 8-year wise advantage, I guess the flip side you can say is Jake Matthews will have an 8-year youth advantage, but it feels like Jake Matthews has just been around the globe for a while. I think 2014 he made his UFC debut, and here he is 7 years later still hanging around, not able to really crack that top 10, but stay around enough to play a solid gatekeeper role, and that's possibly what he's going to be doing here against Jeremiah Wells. But I think luckily for Jeremiah Wells, he should be able to get past that gate. So I'm going to go with Jeremiah Wells. I'll take him to win by decision. I'll poke that decision prop a little bit as well. Again, plus 600 crazy in my mind. Unless Wells doesn't get him out of there in that first round, I think that we'll see him grind him out over there about 11 minutes or so, and then make his way to a decision victory. So Jeremiah Wells by decision. Brian Barberena versus Darian Weeks. We got minus 125 for Brian Barberena, plus 105 for Darian Weeks. Now, it's very interesting because I believe we saw Brian Barberena open up in that minus 200 range, and a ton of money flooding in on Darian Weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Darian Weeks actually end up as the favorite come fight time. But I think that's a massive overreaction to the last fight of Brian Barberena, where he got grinded out in the first 2 rounds of his fight against Jason Witt. Rallied pretty well in that 3rd round, but was not able to get 10-8s on all the judges' scorecards. Had a pretty damn good case for it, considering the amount of damage he was able to land. However, we did see Jason Witt land opportune takedowns to really halt the aggression and that comeback rally that Brian Barberena was trying to muster up in that third round. Darian Weeks 5-0, had a lengthy amateur career as well. He fights out of Missouri, not out of Glory, but he has trained with them a couple times. But he trains out of another independent gym out of there. The guy is a wrestler, has some pretty big striking power as well. But I think in terms of level of competition, this is going to be a massive step up for him. And say what you want about Brian Barberena, the guy is still a very tough and wily veteran that I think it's going to be tough for Darian Weeks to have as much success as he's had in his 5 professional fights. I think if Darian Weeks just watches the Jason Witt fight, he can find enough confidence in that fight to go out there and land takedowns of his own. However, I think he'll have trouble in terms of keeping Barberena down. And once Barberena gets back to his feet, I think he'll really start to put it on Darian Weeks. Now, Darian Weeks' opponents mainly have been looking to take him down as they believe that was the best way to, stay away from the big power that he has on the feet. But all those opponents pretty much failed, and Darian Weeks was able to get them out of there. Barberena might get taken down a couple times early in this fight, but I think the longer that it goes, it benefits a guy like Barberena. And I do think that he could go out there and probably finish this fight a little bit later on as well. Barberena round 3 currently sits at plus 1100. That's probably the only stab I'm going to take on this fight. But I do think that there is a large skill discrepancy here. And the misconception that Barberena is washed and done could be pushing people to be betting the Darian Weeks side. But I really don't think that Weeks at this moment in time has what it takes to cut it inside the UFC. I do think that Barberena is going to be tough to put away. Weeks has had tremendous success in terms of getting guys out of there early in fights, but if he's not able to get Barberena out of there early, I think he's going to struggle to maintain that that style that he has, and I think that we'll see Barberena rally later in this fight and actually get that finish compared to what he was unable to do against a guy like Jason Witt. I like Barberena here. Not with the most confidence. There are a couple things that we need to worry about. Obviously, that weird procedure that he had for his stomach before the Jason Witt fight. We don't know if there's lingering effects for that. Obviously, he ended up losing that fight against Jason Witt, so maybe there was something there. But I'm just a little bit concerned in terms of being fully invested in Barberena here. He should win. Again, Weeks still very green. Not that young. I believe he's in his 30s at this point. He had a very lengthy MMA career, or amateur MMA career, like I said. But again, this is the toughest opponent he's going to have had faced, and I don't think he'll have as much grappling success as he's had in his earlier career. So I'll go with Barberena. I'll take him to win by decision, but I will be poking that round 3 prop as well at plus 1100 because you guys know I love me some round 3 props. Manel Kape versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. We have minus 260 on Manel and plus 220 on the Kazakh fighter Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Now, once the odds for this fight dropped, I was a little bit surprised at the line being as wide as it is, especially considering that Manel Kape has had some underwhelming performances in his first 3 stints or his first 3 walks to the octagon. But after running the tape, it's pretty clear that Manel Kape should win this fight, should he go out there and fight to the level of his potential that we truly believe that he has. Zhalgas has pretty much been a point fighter for the last half of his career. His first 6 fights all ended via stoppage. But then since then, he's only managed to get 1 knockout and 1 submission and has really reverted to being a point fighter. Goes out there, lands some good combinations, and just tries to get the better of his opponents in those instances. But when he's not, he ends up coming up on the short end. With Manel Kape, I think he's going to be the faster fighter, show the better footwork, and I do think he'll be able to counter effectively here and land the better strikes on the feet to sway the judges in his favor. But this fight could play out damn close if he's not able to put enough sauce on those strikes to truly make the judges see that he's landing the better strikes, because Zhalgas could potentially match him on the strikes here in terms of the amount of output. It's going to come down to the amount of impact that Kape is going to be landing compared to what Zhalgas is going to be landing with. The spot that I actually like the most in this fight is the over 2.5, and the fight goes to decision. I feel like this could be one of those fights where they're just staring at each other a little bit, throwing pot shots every now and then, but I do think that Zhalgas shows very solid durability. He's only been knocked out once in his career. He ended up rematching the same guy that knocked him out, and we ended up going the full 15 minutes against him, which leads me to believe that maybe that was just an anomaly of a finish for him getting finished. And then now on the on the Manel Kape side of things, I just don't think that Zhalgas has the power to put on Kape and actually put him away in this fight. So I think we're just going to see a back and forth striking battle here, maybe a little grappling going on between the two, but I do think that we'll see this fight go to the judges' scorecards, and I do think that it will actually be sided more so to the Manel Kape side of things, as again, I think he'll be quicker to the punch. I think his footwork will get him out of bad positions against a guy like Zhalgas, who's a little bit more meat and potatoes with the striking approach, especially when he's like really in the thick of it. He likes to go out there and just, throw shots and really move his feet to I want to call it robotically, but like not the greatest footwork, but good enough to beat, some guys, but I don't think that he'll have as much success here against a more unorthodox fighter like a guy like Manel Kape. So I'm going to go with Manel Kape. I could say he's parlayable at minus 260, but he's shown in past fights that even in fights that he should go out there and win, he fights a little bit too close to the level of his competition. Even the lone UFC fight win he has against O'Day Osborne, he was losing that fight until he landed that beautiful flying knee. So, a little bit cause for concern there. However, I do think that the durability of these guys will show pretty well this weekend, and we'll see this fight go to a decision, which I've already parlayed with something else on this card. But I do think it will eventually be Manel Kape that gets his hand raised here via decision. Duško Todorovic versus Maki Pitolo. We got minus 155 for Todorovic and plus 135 for Maki Pitolo. Now, both guys, Dana White Contender Series alums that had high hopes and high potential coming into the UFC. However, both of them find themselves now, I believe, 2-6 in their UFC career combined. I should say 1-2 for Todorovic and 1-4 for Maki Pitolo. Now, both guys, the wins that they actually hold over UFC fighters are not UFC fighters anymore. Daquan Townsend for Duško Todorovic and Charles Byrd for Maki Pitolo. And funnily enough, Charles Byrd ended up retiring after that fight. So the writing was pretty much on the wall for Byrd in that fight regardless. Now, Maki Pitolo, strong puncher, good grappling as well if he needs it. And he's really able to put the pressure on his opponents when he's able to have his success. Whereas Duško Todorovic is a little bit of the polar opposite, likes to keep his range, likes to stay at distance, and really kind of just chops down his opponent with his karate style, blitzes forward at times, and really gets his best work going at that point. However, it's really not worked for him over the last two fights. Punahele Soriano was able to find that chin, a couple minutes into their fight, and then Gregory Todorovic was landing really good shots and pushing the pressure for the majority of the fight, even landing a couple of takedowns at opportune moments to secure rounds for himself as well. Maki Pitolo can do all of that. I think he can swing. I think he can strike. I think he can land on Duško Todorovic, but I think his grappling and his clinch game will be his path to victory in this fight. He should be able to drag Duško down, time and time again, sway the judges in his favor, and really put the fight on Duško, making it very difficult for Duško to get his karate style and space that he really needs to operate in his fights. I don't really know how much more to say about this fight. I think it's going to come down to Maki Pitolo getting his hands on Todorovic and Todorovic getting that space that he needs to operate. But I just don't think that's going to happen, especially with that small cage that we're going to be getting over there at the UFC Apex. So I do like Maki Pitolo in this fight. I do think that he'll put that pressure on Todorovic, really clinch him up against the cage, drag this fight to the ground when he can, but even really, use his leg kicks, which he's going to need to, especially to close that distance, and really slow down Duško. And then after that, I think he should be able to grind on him, drag him to the ground, get some decent enough control time, good top pressure, and then if Duško does find his way back to his feet, I do think that it'll just be a rinse and repeat type of thing here for Maki Pitolo. So I understand why the amount of money is coming in on Pitolo in this spot. He was a second or a minute or two away from getting that win over Julian Marquez before he got clubbed and subbed late there. If that doesn't happen, he's riding. He could get a 2-fight winning streak going this weekend if he's able to get his hand raised as well. But he did end up losing that fight. I'd be surprised if he falls to something similar to Duško Todorovic this weekend, which is why I'm going to be picking Maki Pitolo, and I'll take him to win this fight via decision. Alex Morono versus Mickey Gall. We got minus 230 on Alex Morono and plus 190 the return on Mickey Gall. Let's start off on the Mickey Gall side of things, who's coming off a successful venture into the cage last time when he was able to dispatch of Jordan Williams via rear naked choke after stunning him within the first 60 seconds of that fight, and then was able to take over after that, as Jordan Williams really didn't seem to get his he wasn't able to recalibrate after getting knocked down early in that fight, and then he obviously paid for it with the superior jiu-jitsu that was coming his way from the Mickey Gall side of things. However, when Mickey Gall doesn't have that striking success, the guy really starts to slow down a little bit, not a little bit, but quite a lot, especially when he's going out there and getting grapple fucked by a guy like Mike Perry in rounds 2 and 3 2 fights ago. I did back Mickey Gall in that fight, as I do believe that I thought the strength that he was putting on and the somewhat improvements that we've been seeing from him, especially with his striking game, was going to be able to be enough to get Mike Perry to the ground and grind him out. However, it just shows that he's really not that fighter that a lot of people were expecting him to pan out to be, especially earlier in his UFC career. He's put together a decent, winning streak and a couple good wins inside the UFC. Guys like George Sullivan, Salim Tahari, and then obviously Jordan Williams last time around. But honestly, I still don't think that Mickey Gall would cut it in the top 20 of this division, and this Alex Morono fight is going to be a big wake-up call for him to do so. If he does go out there and, fall in love with his striking just because he was able to get a good win over Jordan Williams, which stemmed from his striking. If he tries to do that here against Alex Morono, I think he's going to find himself in a world of hurt. And even if he tries to take this fight to the ground, I think that's just only going to accelerate the issue of his cardio, and then I think he's going to start to slow down, and we'll see Morono take over. There's been so many times in the past where I've wanted to back Morono, or I have backed Morono, but I've really had a tough time in terms of pinpointing exactly what he's good at. The guy just goes out there and he fights, and he wins more often than not, right? Some fights that he shouldn't win, he goes out there and he wins. But what it comes down to is just his ability to fight, to go out there and throw strikes. And that's usually what his opponents are able to, or what his opponents kind of succumb to, is the pace, the pressure, and the output that he continuously puts on them. He's a BJJ black belt, but we really didn't even see him tackle his grappling advantage that he'd have over some of his opponents until his Reese McKee fight. Normally he just goes out there and swings leather, and he had decent enough power in his hands to put his opponents out, so good luck, good for him there. But for him to truly have success, I thought he'd need to get these guys to the ground and use his jiu-jitsu. However, he hasn't needed it. And even here, I don't think he'll need too much of it, as I think he can go out there and put a pace and a pressure on Mickey Gall that Mickey will eventually falter to. I think Mickey is riding high off that win over Jordan Williams, but that's going to give him some false sense of confidence coming into this fight against Morono, who's going to be a way tougher test and will give him much more issues. As long as Morono's chin isn't completely cracked from that Chaos Williams knockout from almost 2 years ago now, I think he should be able to take whatever shots Mickey Gall is throwing at him and then just keep pressing forward, using his volume and his output to put it on Mickey Gall, and then I think he can eventually break him. So there's two ways that I'm going about this fight, or could go about this fight. I love Alex Morono's money line. You could even parlay him if you want, because I think he's that much better than Mickey Gall in this spot. However, the under 2.5 at plus 160, plus 170 is not too bad of a spot either, because it could cover an early Mickey Gall club and sub, or even just a club. Or it could cover a Morono finish in the second or third round, as I do believe that Morono could break Mickey Gall and then eventually find that finish in this fight. Morono more often than not looks for the finish in his fight and is usually progressing to get that finish in his fights, and I think that's what's going to cause Mickey Gall some problems in this fight. So I really like Morono in this spot. Don't be surprised if I have a pretty solid wager on him here, but I do think he blows Mickey Gall out of the water. The only real case of risk or any threat that could potentially happen here is a possible early club and sub situation for Mickey Gall, similar to what he was able to pull off against Jordan Williams. So I like I like Alex Morono here, and I think he's going to get Gall out there via TKO in round 3. Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis. We got minus 345 for All-In Allen and plus 285 for the action man, Chris Curtis. Now, Chris Curtis obviously riding high off of his UFC debut, where he was getting touched up for 3.5 minutes before finding that beautiful strike to put Phil Hawes on wobbly legs, and then eventually follow up with some strikes to get him out of there and notch his first ever UFC win in his first ever UFC fight. However, he's taken that confidence to another level now with taking another fight at middleweight, a weight class he probably shouldn't be fighting at. But I think that he'll come to that realization once he starts to deal with the size and the style of Brendan Allen here. Now, Brendan Allen is a guy that I used to fade in the past as well, but I think he's really started to put his game together, especially since moving down there to Stanford MMA. His striking look career best in his last fight against Punahele Soriano, where he was able to rip body kicks over and over again, really getting Soriano to react to them and then letting his hands go after that as well to get his, to really sway the judges in his favor. We're getting a similar situation here where he's going to be going up against another southpaw, which opens up that body kick, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see that over and over again in this fight. He's really going to have to use his kicks a lot to keep Chris Curtis on the outside, as he's going to be the bigger fighter here. I believe he has a 6-inch height advantage, and we've seen him obviously use his kicks very effectively, and I do think that we'll see it once again this weekend against the guy in Chris Curtis. And then when he needs to, if the fight does get into close quarters too much, I do think that he has the wrestling ability to get this fight to the ground and get his jiu-jitsu going, which is probably the bread and butter of his game when it really comes down to it. Chris Curtis, in my opinion, is KO or bust in this spot again. I think for him to have success, he has to let his hands go and close that distance, and then really, bite down on the mouthpiece and get his strikes going. But if he's not able to land that knockout, I think he's going to get picked apart at distance and then eventually taken down and grinded out from on top as well. I wouldn't be surprised if this looks like the Magomed Karamov fight, where Karamov was really able to keep him at bay with kicks and then land a couple takedowns when he needed to really wear out and grind down Chris Curtis. And I could see a similar situation happening here. It's a great Cinderella story for Chris Curtis to get into the UFC, 30 plus fights into his MMA career, get that upset victory in his UFC debut, but the MMA gods are ruthless nonetheless, and they will remind Chris Curtis why he shouldn't be fighting at middleweight, and maybe he's just getting a little bit too ahead of himself, especially against a guy like Brendan Allen. Now, Allen, I again, like I said, he's really panning out to be a great all-around fighter, but I do think that the potential that we saw from him in the LFA is now really starting to translate over to the UFC, and I think we should see him go out there and pick up his third straight victory this weekend. So I'm going Brendan Allen. I really think that he could put a hurting on Chris Curtis. Curtis, typically difficult to put away, and I think that will be ringing true this weekend as well, which is why I'm going to be going with Brendan Allen to win this fight via decision. Leonardo Santos versus Clay Guida. We got minus 180 on Santos and plus 160 on Clay Guida. Now, Leonardo Santos obviously coming off that last second buzzer beater loss to Grant Dawson, who was able to ground and pound him out with 1 second remaining on the clock. However, I thought he made a very good account of himself against a young up-and-comer like Grant Dawson in those first 2 rounds. He was able to shuck off plenty of takedowns and really get his striking going from the distance. A lot of his strikes coming from his kicks, but he's very long and rangy when he throws his 1-2 down the middle. And he was definitely landing some good strikes on Grant Dawson, getting the better of some positions as well. I actually ended up looking it up on MMA Twitter, and they did release the judges' scorecards for the first 2 rounds, had this fight have gone to a decision. And the judges actually had Grant Dawson up 2-0 on 2 scorecards, and then it was 1-1 on the other scorecard. I thought Leo Santos had a good argument to win at least both those first 2 rounds. To be honest, it was a lot of him just shucking off takedowns and landing some good damage from distance, whereas Grant Dawson, the only real offense that he was putting together was takedown attempts, and not even completing them either. So that was very interesting to me. Hilarious that Leo Santos is still having as much success as he has at this prime age of 42 years old, or 41. I believe he's going to be 42 come April of next year, or February of next year, sorry. Whereas Clay Guida, on the other hand, 4 days after this fight, he's going to be turning 40 years old. So a couple old-timers that we got here, but I do really like Leo Santos in this fight, as I just don't see where Clay Guida is going to beat him. Is he going to try to take him down? Yeah, good luck doing that against a BJJ black belt like Leo Santos. I don't know if you want to get into that realm, not to mention the 89% takedown defense that Leo Santos boasts as well. And then from range and the striking, Leo Santos has that pop in his shots, right? It was hilarious. He comes into the UFC as this BJJ specialist. Yeah, he's just deading dudes with his striking, which a lot of people were surprised about. But he's doing it pretty effectively. The guy's long, the guy's rangy, and he really knows how to throw his power into that right hand once he throws it down the middle. He's a switch stance fighter as well, right? Like, you'll see him fight southpaw, you'll see him fight orthodox. A lot of his centered around opening up that body kick to his opponents and really just kind of keeping his range and just throwing that 1-2 from distance. Not often do you see him engage in the clinch and the grappling, letting his BJJ black belt go. Which I find a little bit interesting, especially considering the style of fighter that he is. But he's having tremendous success in the striking. So, Clay Guida could have a small cardio advantage here, but what is that really going to do for him when, if this fight stays in the striking, he's probably going to get kicked, or he's probably going to get touched up down the middle with that 1-2. And then in the grappling, good luck taking this guy down. And even if you do take him down, you're not going to be better than him on the ground. So I guess the only thing really keeping me from hammering Leo Santos here is the fact that he's almost 43 years old. It's taken me a little while to finally accept the fact that, betting somebody that's 40 plus years old is probably not the best thing to do. But in this situation, it seems like pretty obvious, right? If Clay Guida had any shot, I don't think that we'd see the line as wide as it is currently right now. So at minus 180, I like Leo Santos, man. I think he goes out there and he finds a solid finish over Guida here, and I saw the submission line around plus 300. I think that's a damn good spot. I'm going to be, making a pretty decent play on that line, as I do think that we've seen Clay Guida, when he does get into trouble, he gives up submissions, and I'm expecting the same thing here. So I think that we're going to see, let's fuck it. I think this is going to be pretty much done within 5 minutes. I'm going to go Leo Santos first round, club and sub. Let's go Leo Santos. I think he has this one wrapped up pretty easily, and I think he'll be able to get Guida out there pretty quickly. So once again, round 1 submission for Leonardo Santos. Jimmy Crute versus Jamal Hill. We got minus 165 on Jimmy Crute and plus 145 on Jamal Hill. Now, it's very interesting to see Jamal Hill as an underdog, because normally he's going out there and being a heavy favorite, minus 250, minus 300 in most of his fights, especially in his last fight against Paul Craig, where, Paul Craig pulled guard, I believe, and then got his arm tangled up and was able to just snap his arm. It was a very unfortunate loss for Jamal Hill that night. Normally when Jamal Hill has success, he's able to keep the fight vertical and really just pick his opponents apart from distance. But when he is getting taken down or on the ground, things look a little bit fishy, and I think a guy like Jimmy Crute could definitely put him in some bad positions here. This could be a market overcorrection on Jamal Hill's last fight. I think that this could be maybe people just being a little bit overzealous and thinking, oh, Jamal Hill is absolute dirt on the ground and Jimmy Crute should be able to do some work here. My question marks here are more so Crute's ability to get this fight to the ground, because if he's not able to, Jamal Hill is going to have tremendous success on the feet, picking him apart from there. If Jimmy Crute's not able to ground this fight, I think that Jamal Hill wins the fight. I think that this is a fight that we should probably wait for the live betting, because if Jimmy Crute wins, he could possibly pull off a first round sub, whatever, that's fine. But if he doesn't get that takedown and Jamal Hill starts to reverse the tide and turn the tide and really get the stuff into his momentum by landing the better strikes and keeping the fight vertical, then this is going to look a lot worse for Jimmy Crute than people expected it to. So I have no interest in betting this fight, because I just want to see what kind of Jamal Hill we're going to be getting and what he actually has to deal with when he does get taken down, because he hasn't fought somebody as tenacious as Jimmy Crute to get this fight to the ground, right? Paul Craig, again, had to pull guard to be able to pull off that submission, but Jimmy Crute, he should be able to ground this fight, but I just don't have the confidence to actually bet him at minus 165 here, nor am I willing to, jump on the market overcorrection of Jamal Hill, who all of a sudden is, a bad fighter. A lot of people had good potential on him, and I still believe he has potential. It all just comes down to stylistic matchups. I didn't think he'd end up on the ground with Paul Craig, but he did. I think Jimmy Crute would get him to the ground, but will he? We don't know. That's my concern here. I do think that Crute will ground him. I just don't have enough confidence in his wrestling to pull the trigger myself. So my official prediction is going to be Jimmy Crute by second round submission. Maybe, let's call it first round submission. Fight doesn't go to decision on minus 325, could be parlayable, but my concern is if Jamal Hill does keep this fight on the feet, does he overextend enough to actually get Jimmy Crute out of there, or is he just going to point fight him on his way to a decision victory? I could see either outcome happening. I'm going to sit back and enjoy this fight as a fan, but as a predictor, you guys are coming to me for a prediction, I'm going to go Jimmy Crute first round submission. Rafael Fiziev versus Brad Riddell. This is a fantastic co-main event that we got for this card. Minus 120 for Fiziev, plus 100 for Riddell. And I'm surprised that the money is continuing to come in on the Fiziev side, who has been guilty of having some hype tax on him over his last couple fights, at least since the Mark D. Casey fight. But I'm glad that the people are giving respect to Riddell and making this, as close to a pick'em fight as you can. However, I do think that Riddell deserves to be the slight favorite in this spot. Now, both guys are familiar with each other as they both used to train at Tiger Muay Thai, and then obviously once Tiger used to start to fall apart, Fiziev headed on over to American Top Team, whereas Riddell went down there to City Kickboxing and was able to really round out his game down there. Fiziev, very good with throwing combinations. A lot of his offense coming from his kicks, especially to the body, which I think is very good for him. But he does seem to start to taper off the longer that fights go, and that's the complete opposite of what Brad Riddell does. Brad Riddell, there are times where he digs himself into a hole in round 1, but after that, he really starts to pick it up in round 2 and round 3, which leads me to believe that he should start to win the longer that this fight goes. I think if there is a finish in this fight, it probably comes from the Brad Riddell side, right? We've seen Fiziev get dropped and actually finished by Magomed Mustafayev, and I do think that Riddell hits with tremendous power, and he could put Fiziev in trouble, especially the later that this fight goes, and we've seen the striking defense of Fiziev and even the cardio start to drop off a lot, especially that Bobby Green fight as well. Brad Riddell, he's showing great takedowns and takedown defense as well, whether it's to bail him out of bad positions or even defensively speaking to get back to his feet and get back to his Muay Thai game, which is obviously the bread and butter of his game. I'd love to see a full MMA display here, but I do think that we'll see the majority of this fight take place in the striking realm, where we'll see Fiziev have early success, but then as the fight starts to wear on, I think that we'll see Riddell start to take over. I took a shot on Riddell at plus 110. I think it was a great spot. And I do, like I said earlier in this breakdown, I do think he deserves to be the slight favorite in this spot. I also think that Riddell has the potential to knock out Fiziev. Riddell by KO is sitting at plus 440. And Riddell even at round 3 is sitting at plus 2200, which I think is live in this spot considering how much Fiziev starts to slow down later in his fights. I like what Riddell brings to the table here. Again, he doesn't throw as many combinations as Fiziev does, but he waits and he's disciplined and patient enough to wait for his openings so that he can throw everything into his strikes and really hurt his opponents, whether it's to the head, to the body, or even some leg kicks. I like him defensively speaking as well. I think it's much more responsible than what Fiziev brings to the table, which is why I lean on the Riddell side for this fight. Again, I think he's the better overall fighter here, and I do think he's making much more improvements than what Fiziev's showing. And even though Fiziev, again, he likes to talk and he has a little bit of a social media personality about him, I do think that Brad Riddell is the better fighter, and I think it will show this weekend. So I think that we'll see, like I said, Fiziev win early and the Riddell start to take over late. Won't count out Riddell KO, but my official prediction for this fight is going to be Riddell by decision. Time for the main event. We got a great bantamweight scrap here between Rob Font coming off his first ever main event slot where he's able to pick up a victory over former bantamweight king Cody Garbrandt. He's going up against Jose Aldo, who's coming off a career best performance against Pedro Munoz, and I say career best as he landed 114 significant strikes on Pedro Munoz that night in a 3-round fight, which is hilarious considering the fact that in previous 5-round fights, he's only been averaging about 77 significant strikes per fight. In terms of odds, we're looking at minus 140 for Rob Font, plus 120 the return on the Brazilian legend Jose Aldo. Now, I think the reason that we saw Jose Aldo go out there and land as many strikes as he did against Pedro Munoz was due to the style of Pedro Munoz. He moves forward with not much regard for his striking defense and just tries to throw bombs, and that plays right into the game of Jose Aldo, who did a really good job in terms of picking him apart with combinations and then sticking and moving and getting out of the way of bad positions. However, we did see him take a pretty decent amount of time off in that 3rd round, as it did seem that that pace and that cardio was slowly starting to catch up with Jose Aldo. However, luckily enough for him, Pedro Munoz was unable to manufacture any type of offense himself, which allowed Jose Aldo to come away with that decision victory. But again, he looked amazing in that fight. Great boxing combinations, great body work, and great movement. However, how is that going to translate to a 5-round fight if he needs to go 25 minutes, especially against a guy like Rob Font? I think Jose Aldo has a decent chance to go out there and finish this fight early, especially with the nasty body work that he's able to put on his opponents, and he could obviously open that up here against Rob Font. However, if he's not able to put him away within those first 2 rounds, it's very difficult to muster up enough confidence to be like, Jose Aldo can win a 5-round fight. He hasn't won a 5-round fight since UFC 200 when he was able to beat Frankie Edgar and come away with the undisputed featherweight strap once again, where he was able to beat him over 5 rounds. However, since then, he's been unable to win a 5-round fight and seems to get finished in rounds 3, 4, or 5 of his fights as his cardio really starts to taper off and his opponents really start to bring it up in terms of the output, volume, and pressure that they start to put on Jose Aldo themselves. Rob Font in his last couple of fights has been able to really see an uptick in his output as rounds start to progress throughout his fights, and that's going to be very important for him here, especially to really make Jose Aldo work and exploit that gas tank that seems to be an issue of Jose Aldo the more that fights seem to go on. In the past, Rob Font has had difficulty dealing with guys that just move forward and throw heavy body shots and heavy strikes. However, I'd be very surprised if Jose Aldo is successful in doing that over 20 minutes or even 15 minutes to be able to secure a decision victory in this fight. I'm not 100% sold on either guy, right? I think a lot of people might be thinking that Jose Aldo is rejuvenated and he's, a new version of himself and finally comfortable at 135 pounds. However, I think this fight against Rob Font will really be able to tell us whether that's true or not. And then on the Rob Font side of things, talk about a solid step up in competition, right? Cody Garbrandt really hasn't really been the same fighter since he got knocked out by TJ Dillashaw. And, Font has been able to put together some solid victories. However, this is going to be his toughest task to date. I think the best thing that benefits him here in this fight is the fact that it's 5 rounds. And if he's able to go out there and put on stay safe in those first 2 rounds and to really start to pick it up with his, his boxing, his striking, his foot movement, he should really be able to put up some numbers against Aldo and take away a judge's decision in this fight. I'm seeing a lot of people, say that Font could possibly get him out of in the 4th and 5th rounds, but I just don't think that Font is going to overextend himself too much here to put himself in trouble against a guy like Jose Aldo looking for a finish. I think he'll be fine with a masterpiece of a work in this fight to win rounds 3, 4, and 5 and just outpoint and out volume Jose Aldo the longer that this fight goes. Again, it's very tough for me to fade the King of Rio. He's 35 years old. I think he still has a little bit left in the tank, and if he does have as much in the tank left as I believe he does, he should be able to beat a guy like Rob Font, who again is coming into his career best form as well. So the side for me is Rob Font here. I can't pull the trigger myself, but I do understand why people are betting both sides in this fight. It's just not enough for me to pull the trigger. I want to see if Jose Aldo is really back or if Rob Font is really the goods, if he can get a scalp like Jose Aldo on his belt here. I am going to go with Rob Font. Like I said, I think he picks it up the later that this fight goes, and I think he takes this home via decision. And those are the breakdowns. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you haven't already, make sure you guys hit that like, hit that subscribe. That's the best way to show your boy some support. And you may have noticed a couple different graphics if you guys are watching the podcast. A little bit of difference in the graphics. I wanted to expedite my time a little bit more rather than having to spend all that time making up the graphics. Again, one-man show over here. So I'm trying to make it still look nice, but with a little less information, so I don't have to slave myself trying to put all this information together for you guys for one little small part of the podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy the look of the podcast still, but audio wise, everything is still the same. Appreciate you guys with the support. Again, check out the Patreon if you guys want to support your boy. $5 a month gets you a ton of great content. Not to mention the Coolbet as well. Shout out to my guys over that Coolbet. Make sure you guys use promo code MMALOTN2 and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. All right. UFC Vegas 44, let's try to get this money this weekend so we can parlay that shit into UFC 269 next weekend, which is a big pay-per-view. A lot of great fights, a lot of great betting opportunities as well that I can't wait to dig into for you guys. But for now, UFC Vegas 44, let's try to get this money this weekend. Good luck on your bets, and I'll see you guys next week.